Hello and welcome to this little presentation on study reading. This is hitting several of your course competencies for Reading 100. So let's go ahead and get started. Study reading is a type of reading sometimes known as active reading. And you may be familiar with these systems of study reading like SQ3R. A lot of old textbooks will use that one. We're going to be using this PRO system. There are many different kinds of study reading systems or active reading systems, and they are all just ways to help us remember the three parts of study reading or active reading. And since there are three parts, I prefer to use the PRO system because the P is part 1, the R is part 2, and the O is part 3. So we're going to go over those right now. This is meant to be an interactive type of video situation. So we'll go through some things. Please take notes as you go, and you'll be able to use the notes on the activity portion. Here is a list of the competencies that we will cover in this whole module. You don't have to memorize those, but in a nutshell, when we're finished with these series of lessons, series of videos, you should be able to do the following things. You should be able to explain what to do before reading in the form of the 4 Ps. That's the P part of PRO. You should be able to explain what to do during reading. That's the R. And what to do after reading. And more importantly, you should be able to be practicing these things while you continue to work on your reading skills. Later we will add a V and an E to that PRO, and you'll prove it to me. Let's get started with the PRO. You can see that there's a before reading, a during reading, and an after reading. The before reading, it starts with a P, and that's an easy way for you to remember the 4 things to do before you start reading. This comes from a body of research known as the good reader, poor reader research, where they look at what good readers do that's different from what poor readers do. And pre-reading is one of the biggest differences between these two groups of people when we look at what readers do. Good readers always pre-read. Poor readers rarely pre-read. And it becomes, for good readers, it becomes such a habit that it happens automatically. So good readers are doing it without even knowing that they're doing it. And poor readers tend to skip this step. So if you count yourself in the poor reader category, one way to get better is to do this step, and we'll be practicing this in class. There are 4 things to do. They all start with the letter P, so we'll call them the 4 Ps. You preview, you predict, you look at your prior knowledge, access your prior knowledge, and you find a purpose for the reading. Now, preview and predict are things that you can do in one fell swoop by looking at the headings and the boldface and the pictures. You preview it, and then you predict things that will happen. Previewing and predicting is almost like what happens when you first look at a Google map or a MapQuest map. And you don't necessarily read closely where you make your turns. You just first of all get an idea of what direction you're going in and what major freeways you go on. That's an example of previewing. If you then in turn decide, oh, I better not take that freeway at this time of day because I predict it's going to be crowded, let me take surface streets. You're doing this step, you're previewing and predicting. How do you do it in a textbook? Well, what you're doing is making a guess about what the passage is about. And you do that by asking questions. So if you can take those headings that are in textbooks and turn them into a question, you're doing both of these P's in one step. Let's practice that. I want you to formulate some questions from these headings. I will click on each one of them, and in your little quiz, go ahead and write down some questions that you think a passage under that heading might answer. Here they are, and then I'll stop the video.